So welcome, it's Katie again, and here's the video to describe fork-mashable texture. So this is based on the national descriptors for the United Kingdom. Look below, down there, can you see it? That's the link to the national descriptors if you want to check anything or look back or just keep a copy. So it's there to look at when you're cooking. Also, I hope that this video, I'm going to try and pin it on my channel so it's high up so you can come back and look and check, just if you're not sure. So here we go, fork-mashable. What does it mean? How do I know I'm getting it right? So I'm going to use a banana to help me to explain the fork-mashable texture guidelines. So here I am, I'm going to peel off the skin because food that are fork-mashable texture should not have any skins or outer shells on. It shouldn't have any hard, tough, fibrous, stringy textures to it. It should be soft, tender and moist. It does need some chewing, but it can be mashed easily with a fork. Now that's not to say that you're supposed to mash it before it's given or before you eat it, but what that means is that it's soft enough that it could be easily mashed with a fork if you tried. That's one of the key differences between a fork mash and a pre-mash. Fork-mashable can just be lovely soft food that's chopped up into small pieces. The food doesn't have to be mashed, it's just got to be soft enough so you could mash it with a fork if you tried to. There should be no loose or thin fluid that comes off the food, so obviously with a banana there isn't any of that. And when you're dealing with fruit and vegetables, one of the things to look out for is there shouldn't be any pips or seeds or pith inside that's going to be hard. There should be no hard chunks. So if the food that you're preparing has hard chunks in, you'll need to cook it to soften it. Or if you can't cook it, mash it, grate it to make it softer, then you need to remove it. Now look, can you see how easily that is breaking down just from me pressing a fork on it? That tells you that it's soft and tender and moist enough to qualify to being a fork-mashable texture food. If you're cooking or preparing meat to a fork-mashable texture, you need to make sure that there's no skin or bone or gristle. So make sure you take those things off either before you cook the food or once it's cooked, remove those things and check that you've got all the bones. For example, if you're doing fish, you've removed all of those. One thing that's difficult for people with dysphagia, or can be, is things that are round or long shaped. Things like sausages, grapes, very round sweets. If you think about the shape of that and the shape of your airway, if they are not broken down and cut properly, and if they're swallowed, then that is the perfect shape to cover your airway, and when you choke that would stop somebody from breathing because it would completely cover the circular shape of your airway. And so if you've got foods of that shape, it's easy enough. All you need to do is just cut them down so they're not around. There should be no hard, kind of crispy, crunchy or crumbly bits to it. It should be moist as well, so it shouldn't have any it shouldn't be overly dry. If you want to eat a food or give a food that is dry or crispy or crumbly, then you just need to think about how you can prepare it so that it's soft, tender and moist before you give it. Adding sauce is a great way to moisten things so that they're soft, tender and moist and not dry, hard and crumbly. Try to avoid giving people foods that's very overly sticky, like some types of cheese or melted marshmallows can be very sticky. So if you want to have something like that, just make sure that you cook and prepare it so when it's about to be eaten, it's not a sticky consistency. Also, another food that can be difficult and it should be adapted if given to someone on a fork-mashable texture is floppy foods. So things like lettuce, cucumber. You'll see I've done a vlog on cucumber video for you to watch to see how you can adapt that so it's not that like floppy texture. Be aware of any foods that give off water when you bite into them. Things like watermelon are a prime example, cucumber's another. It's not to say you can't enjoy these things, but if you want to have that, then why don't you blitz it up and drain the excess fluid off before you then eat it. Loose fluid in your mouth as well as chunks of food are really difficult to control. By draining the fluid beforehand, you're making sure that person only has one texture to deal with in the mouth and to prepare to a safe enough texture to swallow. Any sort of fluid or gravy or sauces like custard or anything that you put with the Fork-mashable texture, it should be nice and thick. So it shouldn't be very thin and run off, it should be nice and thick so it kind of clings to the food. If you're giving meat, pieces of soft, tender meat, it must be served no bigger than 15 millimeters, so that's 1.5 centimeters. So just check that you've shredded it or you've minced it, or that it's been cooked over a long time so it beautifully falls apart and you can just cut it into those small pieces before you give it. So all you need to remember, are we gonna let dysphagia stop us eating the foods that we love? No way, it's too much of our life, it's too much of an important thing. All we've got to do is understand the texture guidelines and then just be creative for those foods that might have hard skins, that might be dry or crumbly, that might be round in shape, that might have pips. We've just got to adapt them before we eat them, before we give them, to a fork-mashable texture. You don't have to completely rule all those foods out, just think, how am I going to cook this, prepare this so that I still get all the taste that I love. It's still appetizing, but it's soft, tender, moist, easily chewed. That sauces are thick and smooth. Watch the videos on the vlog and we'll do it together.